Hey, I am BrettLeeClark, and this is my channel. In today's video, I'm going to break down the top goofs of Halloween 2, 1981. Feature top movie goofs from this goof. If you're new here, hi, I'm Brett, and I make random videos. Anything from top movie goofs to cooking, to product reviews, to all kinds of stuff. I started doing the Goof series with the Scream franchise. So I've done all the Scream movies, and I did some Top Gun, and Speed, and Mean Girls, and Friday the 13th. And now I'm doing the Halloween franchise all of October. So I did part 1 already, and now we're doing part 2. And I'm going to a wedding this weekend, so I'm going to be out of town for like 4 or 5 days. But next week, I'll start doing the rest of the Halloween franchise. I'll do part 3, and then so on and so on. So if you want to see all the goofs of the Halloween franchise, subscribe. And then after October, leave a comment and let me know which movies goofs you want to see, and maybe I'll do that one next. I start from the beginning and I go to the end, so I may not do all the goofs, but I'll do most of the goofs. So if you know of any other goofs or mistakes that I missed, you can leave them in the comments below if you want. Halloween 2 is probably like the furthest back memory I have of watching the Halloween franchise. I was probably 4 maybe, watching it at my aunt's house, and it was like during the hot tub scene when he's bowling the girl's face. I can still like vividly remember being there and watching that. She had like an Adirondack chair to the left, or like those circle chairs that you sit in back in the day. Remember those? She had one of those, a wicker chair. Yeah, she had a circle wicker chair to the left of the TV. I can still vividly remember it. Anyway, so yeah, Halloween 2 has a memory, has a small place in my childhood heart because it was the very first Halloween I remember seeing as a kid. I think that's all I have to say, so let's get into the top goofs of Halloween 2. So from the beginning, we got some issues right from the jump. So they do this thing where they take clips from the part 1 and they add some new clips as well, which kind of throws it off. So when we first see the Doyle house, the porch lights are on. But then when Jamie Lee Curtis sends the kids out and Dr. Loomis sees them, the porch lights turned off. Then, when Dr. Loomis goes upstairs and he shoots Michael, he shoots him 7 times. Yet his gun only holds 6 bullets because he has a revolver. But he shoots him 7 times. He also even says, "I shot him 6 times, multiple times throughout the movie." But if you listen to all the gunshot sounds, there's 7 gunshot sounds. Listen. Well. So then, when Dr. Loomis is shooting him, in my last video, I had the goof of how he like turns sideways and then like walks backwards off the balcony. Well, he does that here too, but it's a different balcony. In part 1, he falls off like the backyard balcony that has a covering over it, like an awning over the balcony. But in this one, he falls off the front balcony. And he doesn't fall, he pretty much walks backwards. You can see like the platform, he just walks straight off the balcony, which, like, no flipping over the railing or anything, just walks straight off the balcony and falls. But he still walks off in an awkward way. You can see him like walk up the platform and just like fall off. If you're gonna reshoot the scene, make it not look so obvious that he's walking off backwards. I don't understand. So moving on, when Michael goes to Mr. and Mrs. Elrod's house, and that Mr. Elrod is watching The Night of the Living Dead. First of all, that movie's a little out of place. Like the voices and the music and stuff, a little out of place, but that's not that big of a deal. But as he's walking up, you see a pumpkin in the window, right? And then Miss Elrod walks into the living room. Now, from the TV perspective of Miss, like looking at her face on, she's standing in the living room and like a little bit in front of the door. This, like, imagine this is the door frame behind me. She's standing like this. But from Michael's perspective, she's standing clear as day in the door frame, right? Can you see that? So there's that. The way she's standing is different. Also, if you look behind her, the pumpkin is no longer in the window. And then, when Michael goes to grab the knife, he leaves a little bit of blood. But he leaves a little bit of blood at the very top of that cutting board. Yet when she goes and turns around, there's a lot more blood, and it's not in the same spot. It's like more down towards the middle of the cutting board. And there's blood on the sandwich, which we didn't see the sandwich, so maybe it was already there. But there's a little bit, the blood changes positions. So there you go. Then we go back to the Doyle house, and Laurie's being brought out of the front door. Well, here's something from part 1 again. I talked about how like the doorknob was on the other side. Here, again, you can see that I was correct. The doorknob is on that side of the door. Even though Tommy opens it from the left side, the doorknob was on the right side. So she's coming out. As she's getting rolled out, she is now bloody. Right here, under her arm, and all this is now bloody. Now, I made a comment in the last video that she barely bled, she just had a little line on her arm. But also, if you watch the beginning of this movie, her arm isn't bloody because it's the clip from the last movie. No blood at all. Yet now that she's being wheeled out, she's like covered in blood. Well, as they're rolling her down the driveway, right before she gets to the ambulance, you can see the camera shadow just for a second on her like gurney or stretcher, whatever you want to call it. Just for a second, you can see the camera shadow. So after the kid with like the razor blade in his mouth is getting taken into the hospital, the ambulance comes in that Laurie is in, right? Well, as the ambulance is driving through the parking lot, look at the flashing lights on the hood of the car. There are 2 red flashing lights right on the hood of the car. Yet when the ambulance pulls up to the hospital, the flashing lights are now at the bottom, like on the bottom bumper, and there's 0 flashing lights. There's 0 lights up there at all. They're not just not flashing. They're not there. So the lights go from top of the hood to in front of the bumper. See that? So then when Dr. Loomis and Sheriff Brackett are like driving around looking for Michael, and they see what they think is Michael, but it's really Ben Tramer, and they get out of the car. Well, as they get out of the car, Sheriff Brackett closes his door. Okay? And then they go running down the street, and then when Dr. Loomis wants to shoot Michael, Ben Tramer, Brackett and Loomis start fighting fighting for a second. If you look in the background, the cop car has a door open, even though he closed it when he got out. Now the door is open. See that? So then, as the car slams into Ben Tramer, and he's like, bah! And he gets slammed against the other car, he slumps over. Yeah? You see him slump over onto the car? But as soon as it cuts to a different shot, he's now completely upright, pinned against the van. You see that? But he slumped over, and somehow he sat back up real quickly. So then, Sheriff Brackett gets a call that Annie is one of the victims, and he goes to Lindsay Wallace's house. Well, the first thing is that pumpkin, okay? The pumpkin is very big, and the mouse very big, and it's very lit up. That is not the same pumpkin from part 1. Obviously, it's multiple years later like that they filmed it. But they didn't even try to make it look the same size or anything as part 1. Nor did they try to do the balcony the same. So I guess a pumpkin wouldn't matter either. So anyway, as Annie is coming out, the Sheriff Brackett pulls the sheets back. Well, when he does, there's like 3 goofs here. Or actually, yeah, there's like multiple goofs here. So when he pulls the sheet back, he pulls it down past her chest, like to here, right? And first thing is, he pulls it here, and you can see like her neck moving, like her heart's beating. You can see her heart beating through her neck. And then in the next shot, the sheets to here, I guess because they realized you could see her neck moving, so they changed it, but they used 2 different clips. The sheets to here, and then he closes her eyes, and as he does, her eyes like flinch. They don't just barely flinch, they like overly flinch. Like, oh, like something touched my eye. And then we go to the Myers house, where like all the riders are like destroying the Myers house. So as the camera pulls back from the roof, you can see that the address is 709 on the Myers house. Yet when it comes down to Hank, and Hank calls it in, he calls it into 45 Lumpkin Lane as the Myers house address, even though on the actual house itself it says 709.
This is Hunt. Send another vehicle. The old Myers house, 45 Lumpkin Lane.
So when Michael goes in to like get Laurie, and she's like positioned the pillows to make it look like a body, and he starts stabbing into it. One thing is, when he gets done stabbing and he pulls the covers back, there's no longer an upper pillow anymore for like the upper half of her body. And then as he leaves the door open. But when Nurse Jill comes back in, the door has been reshut. And she opens it, and again, you can see that there's no upper body pillow. So we're missing a pillow, and Michael left the door open, but then Jill reopens the door. Then when Jimmy goes into the room and he finds the dead nurse and all the blood on the floor, right? He's like, oh God. And he turns around to leave, and he slips. And when he slips, he falls backwards into the blood. As he falls backwards into blood, it splatters upwards and gets all over his face, like all on the side of his face, right? But in the next shot, or angle, his face has no blood on it. And just keep this in mind, that Jimmy is laying in a pool of blood, okay? So his clothes would be absorbing that blood real fast. And it'd be all over him, his hair would be wet with blood. He has lots of blood on him, right? So keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that in a second. But he has blood on his face that disappears, and his clothes should be soaking up a lot of that blood that he's laying in. So moving on for now, when Nurse Jill sees Laurie, she's like, Laurie, where you go, Laurie? And Laurie turns around, and Michael comes up behind Jill. Well, Jill spins around for a split second and sees Michael. But in the next shot, or angle, like she immediately turned around again, like she's facing this way now. And he stabs her, and he picks her up. When he picks her up, her shoes drop and land, right? But from the other angle, showing Laurie, the shoes have now repositioned themselves in a different way than they landed, which is understandable, but still, you got it wrong, you know. So the shoes fall and land differently, and then from the other angle. So then Laurie is hiding in Jimmy's car, and Jimmy comes and gets in the car. Well, when he gets in the car, he does have a little bit of blood on him. He has a little bit of red right here, and his shirt has a little bit of blood splatter on it, but his back is completely blue. There's no blood at all on his back, even though he was laying in a pool of blood. His hair is not really soaking wet with blood. There's no blood at all on Jimmy, even though earlier, not a few minutes earlier, he was laying in a pool of blood. So then Dr. Loomis and Marion and the cop get there, and they go inside, and Laurie goes to the door, right? And she's banging on it. Well, as soon as Laurie starts banging on the door, we see the cop by the Coke machine. He's like, "Who's banging on the door?" He's right there by the Coke machine, right? And she's banging, "Help me." She bangs for a good 10 seconds more, if not longer, before Dr. Loomis lets her in. She gets inside, and Dr. Loomis shoots Michael. And then we see the cop running past the same Coke machine that he had just turned around at to be like, "Who's banging on the door?" So, not sure what he was doing. He's like, "Someone's banging. I'm going to go this way." Something happened, but he's by the Coke machine. Laurie bangs. A good 30 seconds pass, and then he's just now running past the Coke machine to get to them. You see that? So there you go. And then, at the very end of the movie, after Laurie's done shot him in the eyes twice, which that's a goof by itself, why ain't he dead? But anyway, she shot him in both eyes, and she's a really good aim. And he's swinging his little thing around, and Dr. Loomis undoes all the gas so that it'll be a big explosion. Laurie runs out, and the explosion happens. Well, you watch the explosion, the walls shake, right? But if you look way to the right of the screen, you can actually see like the set. You can see how they have like the walls put up. Like the walls shake because they're fake, but you can actually see that they're fake if you look through that open door frame. There's like boards holding up walls, which I think this is only visible like on the widescreen version, like in the original like the VHS version. You couldn't see this, but now you can. But if you look to the right, you'll see the boards holding up the fake walls for the hallway of the hospital. And then, this is the last one. So after the explosion happens and Michael walks out on fire, you see him walk past a hospital bed. Then it shows Laurie look his direction, and when it goes back to Michael again, he is like 5 feet behind the hospital bed, walking towards the hospital bed. Alright, so that's my top goofs of Halloween 2, 1981. Yeah! Did you guys have fun? If so, leave a like, leave a comment, and let me know what goofs I missed, what goof was your favorite, or what movie you want to see after I finish the Halloween franchise. I'm going to one of my best friend's weddings this weekend that I'm in, so I won't be posting until next week. But next week I'm trying to knock them out as fast as possible and get them all done before Halloween. You can go check out my other goof videos, and you can also follow me on Instagram at BrettLeeClark. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say, so I hope you have a good day.